Well, hello, friends. How are you? I feel like it's been a million years since I've done a video. Uh, I had some travel, and then I had a birthday, and then I have been writing up a storm, trying to finish a book, and it's just been a while since I've gotten in front of the camera like this. You know, a couple of my last videos have been from my writing stream. If you're not familiar with it, you can join me at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or about then. Monday through Friday, and we write till noon. And I just run writing sprints, and I try to get as much done as I possibly can. You can write, you can do other things. Doesn't matter. We've got a great little community there. Would love to see you join us. But that's not what today's video is about. Today's video is actually about a suggestion from one of the people in my chat who wanted me to talk about character development. And I realized that in order to talk about character development, I really needed to talk about the two different kinds of stories, right? Because character development is always important in a story. A story at its core is about change, but it's not just about change. A story is really about the causes of change and what sort of effect they have, right? When there's cause and effect, then you have a plot. And I don't remember who exactly said that, but I know somebody famous who absolutely knew what they were talking about did, which is why I remember it. So what are the two different kinds of stories that you can have? Well, you can have plot-driven and you can have character-driven, right? And a plot-driven story at its completely stripped down bare bones is about what the character does. It's about the circumstances and what that drives the character to do, right? What choice they make. A character-driven story, on the other hand, you're still going to have a plot and you're still going to have the characters doing something, but it's more about how they arrive at the decision, how they arrive at what they want to do, than what they actually end up doing. And so character-driven and plot-driven are the two main kinds of stories that you can write. And all good plot-driven stories have great character development. And all good character-driven stories have great plots. That's the thing, is that this divide isn't necessarily as wide as you think. But most authors, as they develop their voice, find themselves drawn to one or the other. It's very rare that somebody has an even balance. And even if you did have an even balance, it probably wouldn't serve you very well. Because readers tend to like stories that are either plot-driven or character-driven, right? And again, both character-driven stories and plot-driven stories are going to have some of the other elements in them if they want to be a good, well-rounded story, but you're going to be majoring on one rather than the other. I tend towards plot-driven stories. I'm more interested in what the characters do than how they make the decision to do it. But not everybody is like that. The more literary you go, the more character-driven stories become. The more action-adventure or pulp you move, the more plot-driven stories become. But regardless of which side of the fence you're sitting on, you're going to need both plot and characters. And your characters are going to have to grow, and your plot is going to have to develop. We're not going to be talking anymore about plot today. Instead, we're going to be talking about building characters. So the question is, if you want to write a character-driven story, if you want to write a plot-driven story that has strong characterization in it, what do you need to do? What do you need to know? First, you need to understand that there are three main kinds of story arcs when it comes to character development, right? Characters have three different kinds of arcs. There's the positive arc, there's the flat arc, and there is the negative arc. And an easy way to remember this is that the positive arc is a flawed character that gets better, right? They overcome some or all of their flaws. In reality, nobody ever overcomes all of their flaws, but you can watch them grow and become a better person. And now in this sense, better is for a given value. We're not talking objectively about moral standards here. We're just saying that whatever flaw was presented at the beginning of the book is solved by the end of the book. A negative character arc is a lot more rare. Positive character arcs, by the way, make up like probably 85% of fiction. Negative character arcs are a little bit more rare. And in a negative character arc, the character succumbs to the flaw. Instead of getting better, they get worse. Or they really just sort of stay the same and they lose their battle, right? If they're battling against this flaw, they just sort of lose the battle. And negative character arcs tend to have really depressing endings or end in death. But we're going to talk about in a second why you still want to keep negative character arcs around in your stories. Then the third and final kind of character arc you might have is what's called a flat character arc. And a flat character arc is a character arc where the main character states their position at the beginning of the first book and then remains consistent. They are the moral standard throughout the entirety of the series, or throughout the entirety of the book if it's only one book. And they don't change. But what does change is everything around them, right? Everyone else in the story reacts to them. And so that character arc or character development is about the impact that they have on the world, right? Both the positive and the negative character arcs are really about how the world ultimately shapes the individual. Whereas a flat character arc is about how the individual shapes the world. So again, positive character arc is overcoming a flaw. Negative character arc is succumbing to a flaw. And a flat character arc is a constant that influences others. Now, you're going to want all of these kinds of character arcs. And there will be moments in your story where you are going to have one kind of character arc, and then you're going to switch into a different kind of character arc. And negative character arcs are actually supremely useful if they are used in small portions, or if they are used in opposition to one of the other kinds of character arcs. Let me just paint a picture for you to try to make it easier to understand. So if you have a main character, let's say her name is Cynthia, and Cynthia has a flat character arc, right? She knows what's right, and she is going to stand up for what's right, and she is going to stand up against injustice throughout the story. All right, let's put her in a medieval setting, and let's say that there is a group of people that is accused of treason, and they're going to be hanged, right? And she knows that one of the people who's in that group is not guilty, that he wasn't committing treason. Now let's add two other characters to this story, right? Because we could just leave it there. We could just say, okay, that's the story, and the struggle that Cynthia is going to go through over the course of this character development will be maintaining hold of her standard, right? Of not compromising the truth. Her flaw isn't that she knows the truth, because that's not a flaw. Her flaw might be that she is tempted to abandon it in the face of difficulty, but she's not going to, right? So she's going to have she's going to have a positive character arc in that she's not going to give up the truth, and she's going to have a flat character arc because she believed this thing at the beginning and she maintains it at the end, and she is the standard by which we judge everybody else. So now let's add two more characters, because that could be an interesting story, but we could make it more interesting. What if we added a character, a brother, who also stands for the truth, but he happens to be greedy, and over the course of the story, he discovers that if he fabricates evidence against this man who has been accused of treason but is actually innocent, if he fabricates evidence, he could make a lot of money, right? This is a twist on the Judas character. And so what does he do? Well, over the course of his story, he's started knowing the truth, and we've established that he has this flaw, right? What's he going to do? Well, we could either give him a positive character arc because he rises above it and he becomes a better person and he rejects the money and he doesn't fabricate the evidence. Or we could give him a negative character arc and he actually succumbs. He takes the money, he fabricates the evidence, and he ultimately ends up as a worse person than when we started. But what's awesome about this is that in choosing the negative character arc, we can play that off against his sister, Cynthia, right? And she is going to have this flat character arc. But what's important is what that does to him. Because in giving her a flat character arc, she doesn't join him, right? Even though maybe in the past they've done this before. Maybe they've made decisions that were similar in the past. And so, but she doesn't join him. And so all of a sudden, the gap between them, right? Because he's fallen and she's gone straight, but the gap between them all of a sudden highlights her flat character arc, her growth in holding on to the truth. In the same way, we could have a character, let's say the secret police or the officer of the secret police who caught these people, right? And he might know that this guy is innocent. But ultimately, he's going to get rewarded the more people he brings in. So he's just scooping up everybody he can because he wants to get promoted, right? He is ambitious. And his flaw is that he has no regard for the truth and no compassion, and he's just an awful human being. And he could be the villain. But over time, because Cynthia remains steady, because we have that standard that she establishes as our flat character, we might watch as by the end of the book, he overcomes some of these flaws, and he ultimately chooses to punish the ones who have actually committed treason and let the ones who are innocent, even though evidence has been fabricated against them, he might let them go. And if he does, then what we're going to see is all of a sudden his positive character arc takes him from being this evil villain, and it redeems him. But again, we judge that based on the relationship between the characters. Because we have a flat character arc, because we have a negative character arc, it makes the positive character arc all the more positive. One of the real pitfalls that I see a lot of authors running into is that they try to write their characters as isolated individuals, right? Forgetting that in the real world, human relationships are what ultimately create who we are, right? So when a person does something, there's a ripple effect in their relationships. And if they do something good, often that ripple effect is positive. If they do something bad, often that ripple effect is negative. But life is a lot more complicated than that. And so sometimes a character will do something good, and there is a negative ripple effect from it. And sometimes someone will do something bad, and ultimately there's a positive ripple effect from it. And so it's in playing with these interactions and playing with these gaps between the people that we can ultimately demonstrate to our readers that our characters are changing and growing, and that, or they are remaining constant and the world is growing around them, right? And so character development is really just this function of understanding how people change, what causes them to change, why they change, what sorts of things they ultimately decide to do, and why they decide to do them, right? And so character growth for Cynthia might be in looking at the world around her and saying, I'm going to stand for justice because I know this is right. Character growth for her brother might be saying, I am going to give in to my greed, and I am going to continue to foolishly pursue wealth above all other things, even at the cost of my own relationships. And character growth for our villain might be that seeing Cynthia stand on the truth and be uncompromising, despite the cost to her, is going to ultimately make him realize that justice is more important than ambition. And that ruining people's lives just because he can serves no purpose, right? It ultimately leaves him hollow. And so all three of those are character development, right? You can develop positively, you can develop neutrally, just becoming stronger in where you are, or you can develop negatively. So I hope this is helpful to you. I hope that this gives you a bit of a framework to understand how characters interact in stories and understand what you should be looking for in your characters as you're writing. Are your characters growing? Are they remaining the same? Are they degrading, succumbing to their flaws? All three are great. All three work. Understand that the more positive character arcs you have, the more aspirational your story is going to be. The more flat character arcs you have, the more plot-driven your character is going to be. And the more negative character arcs you have, the sort of the darker your story is going to be. All three, again, are great. And I think it's best when we use a mix of them as opposed to just picking one and saying all my characters are going to be this specific thing, right? And at different times during different stories, in different books, even in the same series, you might have characters that switch what kind of character arc they're in, right? You might have a hero that starts with a positive character arc and then moves to a flat character arc, has a small negative character arc that just brings them down slightly because they're succumbing to a flaw, and then has another positive character arc from there that elevates them once more, right? But it's that motion that ultimately is going to make a story that is unforgettable. It is the movement between characters and all of the different pieces of your story that will make your story stick in your reader's head and make it absolutely unforgettable. If you have any questions, definitely leave them in the comments. If you have any other subjects that you'd like me to talk about, definitely leave them in the comments as well. I'd love to get to them. And once again, an invitation for you. If you don't already, come and join me for the writing sprints, 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until noon. We get as many words in as we can, and we have fun chatting along the way. So hope to see you there.